Tēnā koutou katoa. I have always loved learning from other cultures and ancient wisdom. I think it's ancient wisdom for a reason. It stood the test of time, and we can learn so much. And there are so many overlaps as well from different cultures across the world as to the things that have worked for hundreds and thousands of years. And yet sometimes in our Western developed world, we lose sight of that in favour of chasing the new scientific invention. And I think some of the things that we overlook, particularly around thirst for busyness over rest and recovery, thirst for information overload versus creating space in our brain, need to be doing all the time rather than sometimes just being, is for me one of the big aha moments and certainly turning points in my own career. And I think that this starts with, when I think about the ancient wisdom that comes to mind, yoga was ancient well before Lululemon found it. Monks have been meditating well before mindfulness became fashionable in our businesses. And our Māori ancestors were well aware of the community, the connection to our whenua, the land, before climate change became an issue. And now we're all talking about why this is important. And when we look back on this notion of creating space, whether it's pilgrimage, whether it's monks in caves, whether it's Aboriginal walkabouts, there have been throughout lots of ancient cultures, and often at transitional times, transformational times, a need for us to take ourselves off and get some space, a need for us to be quiet. And there is that saying that I love by Ram Dass: the quieter you become, the more you can hear. And for me, it's when I get quiet, I cut through all the noise and busyness that's in my brain, and I start to hear what my soul is saying. I start to hear the important stuff. And of course, this is the same for work and for life. It's where I get my ideas, my creativity, and it's where I have this laser sharp focus and clarity that just doesn't come unless I stop and have space. And yet we are encouraged in our modern Western world to always fill the space, to always be busy doing. We prize ourselves from ticking things off our to-do lists and the doing and the action and the executing. And I'd like to put it to you that potentially one of the most valuable things we can do amid all of that stuff is to stop doing, is to create some space, is to get quiet and still and see what happens. Now, of course, we don't all need to find a cave to meditate in or go off on into the desert. It is about carving out that space and that time in our schedule. And I would put it to you that particularly if you're a leader, that's part of your job. So the need and the accountability and responsibility to think creatively, to think strategically, to plan for the future, all of that requires space. Our brains, when it's in busy doing mode, back-to-back meetings, hundreds of emails, cannot operate in the same space that this focus and creativity and clarity arises from. So for that, we need to stop and do nothing. And whilst that sounds easy, it is probably one of the hardest things for us in our busy working days and in the schedules that we create for ourselves. And yet it'll be where we solve our biggest problems. It's where we make our most accurate decisions. It's also where we hear some of that stuff that through the noise and busyness, we don't get to hear. It enables us to prioritize because we're now aware of what's important. And it also improves our own self-awareness, not to mention giving us that calm and that peace that is so needed to offset the chaos and busyness that we often exist in. For those that have heard me talk about this before, it's this difference between quantity and quality. And it's where we add value and impact. It doesn't matter how many things we've ticked off our to-do list if we don't also put some time in there for tapping into this part of this brain that will help us create, think strategically, solve problems, focus, and gain that clarity and perspective that is critical in us being our best.